Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel Hermani. I'm the head of Division 212 of the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, and I'm very happy to open this session about Central Asia at the Berlin Tropentag at Humboldt University this year. We are very pleased to be able to take part in this session today, and interdisciplinary networking is very important in science and research, particularly in relation to the South Caucasus and Central Asia. And German research has always been particularly interested in collaboration with the South Caucasus and Central Asia. And research cooperation with these regions has real added value to offer. What adds values is the opportunity to address questions of global relevance. The midterm review of the UN Sustainable Development Goals has recently shown us how important this work is. What also adds value is the opportunity to address questions that can only be dealt with in cooperation with researchers from the region of the South Caucasus and Central Asia. The unique flora and fauna, the topography of the regions, or the way that they are adapting to climate change are but a few of the many catchphrases among the various starting points we see in this context. At the same time, cooperation opens up prospects for closer regional ties with the European research area, which is also of mutual interest. And the promising cooperation among and with junior scientists in particular is a remarkable feature of the collaborations with the region. This, of course, brings me to the very core of this session, which combines current and attractive research approaches in collaborations with the South Caucasus and Central Asia, with a focus on collaboration among and with junior scientists. But before I get to this point, I would like to address another aspect of cooperation with the two regions, the geopolitical one. Even before the moment we call the turning point in history, Germany has been looking towards the regions of South Caucasus and Central Asia. As early as 20 years ago, the Federal Ministry of Education and Research significantly advanced the EU strategy on Central Asia and at the same time spoke out in favor of connecting the South Caucasus with the European research area. And the BMBF has continuously been supporting bilateral research collaborations. Continuity, reliability, and a dialogue-centered approach are the key characteristics of our cooperation. These may not be unique characteristics, but they represent meaningful values. These values are the precondition for our mutual trust. Trust has been built up thanks to the partnership between the regions and Germany. And this in turn is the precondition for stable research partnerships. The renewed geopolitical focus that all federal departments and the Chancellery in Germany are placing on the regions shows the importance of these partnerships. So two elements come together. From the point of view of research, it is the desire to develop cooperation with the region. From a political perspective, it is the commitment to support the development. With the timely announcement of funding regulations, we are expressing our political commitment. Over a period of 10 years, we will therefore publish regular funding calls which support collaborations of German researchers with the regions of the South Caucasus and Central Asia. They include various formats, ranging from support for academic mobility to support for comprehensive institutional collaborations. At the same time, we are also engaged in dialogue with our partner ministries in the region and are currently preparing a whole range of joint events. Not least, this will help strengthen and consolidate our mutual trust and understanding. The 4 contributions on current research projects we will be hearing today show us that this understanding translates into resilient cooperation. The Caucasus Barcode of Life project, CABOL, by the Leibniz Institute for the Analysis of Biodiversity Change, the SAVOR Mode 2 project for building up science-based management instruments for Lake Sevan in Armenia by the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research, the Trans Livestock project, examining the challenges and opportunities for value chains in cross-border trade between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan by the University of Gießen, and the Green HYRECA project on the production potential of green hydrogen in Central Asia by the Rainer Lemoyne Institute in Berlin. Afterwards, in the panel discussion on central issues of international research cooperation, we will discuss how we can continue to develop this cooperation. I wish us all an exciting and inspiring and entertaining session, and I give now the word to Ms. Romanowski, also from the Federal Ministry of Education and Research. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning. My name is Patricia Romanowski, and I'm also working with the division of Ms. Hermani. And as she already mentioned, we are very glad to be here again and to participate on the Tropentag 2023. My division is focused on, or our division is focused on funding the cooperation of German researchers with the region of the Eastern Partnership region and Central Asia. But if you are not from this region, or if you are from another region, it may also be very interesting for you, because our ministry is global orientated, and this is just an example. It's also valid for all other regions of the world, so to say. So it's just an example of our funding. In this presentation, I give you a very, very quick overview about our funding system, what we can and perhaps also what we can't do, but perhaps things we can't do, you find in other organizations in Germany. So, of course, we have a political framework under which we work. This is firstly the international framework, like the UN sustainability goals. So we work under parameters, of course. When it comes to research funding and cooperation, we have those parameters which build, so to say, our framework under which we work in the international context. These are, for example, the UN research priorities, like the Sustainability Development Goals of the UN. This is important also for us in the German politics, but also the EU Central Asia strategy, or for other regions, perhaps. We also have Africa strategies in Germany and in the EU. Then we have European neighborhood policy, by bilateral and multilateral agreements under which we work. So these are only some points which build the framework under which we work, and which builds also the frame for the funding we give. as I said, we have bilateral agreements with countries, we have multilateral agreements with countries, which also build the framework under which we work. There are a huge number of different agreements. I don't want to call them all so. But these agreements define specific activities of the cooperation. So the political framework is important. When it comes to our national framework, yes, we have academic freedom, of course, but that does not rule out that our federal ministry can and does fund research according to political priorities. These may be the climate change or a focus on green hydrogen. And as you all know, under the challenges we face now, like the climate change, the pandemic or post-pandemic times, or also the war in Ukraine, also our future will certainly be a time of global challenges. So we try also to focus on these challenges with our funding and fund projects which deal with these challenges. So that's only one reason why it is so important that we need international cooperation in science. And we focus a lot on these international cooperations. Within this immense playing field of collaborations and the possibilities we have, there are a lot of hidden champions. I mean, when it comes to international collaborations, you may have in mind certain countries which are always present, but we have a lot of hidden champions, especially in the regions we work with, which is Eastern Europe, South Caucasus, and Central Asia. And this is one of our biggest focuses in the funding. There are unique research possibilities, especially in like biodiversity, health research, water management, or the adaptation to climate change. And also through the funding programs we offer, we as a ministry answer the growing demand for the cooperation, because yes, we have a real huge demand from this region, from Central Asia, when we are present with on fairs or in bilateral conferences. We face a very huge demand from this region. So we see that it is very important that we grow these partnerships. And this is not, that comes also from or stems from the great possibilities these regions have to offer. Because in Central Asia or in the South Caucasus, we find both an attractive research infrastructure as well as researchers who are very ambitious and want to cooperate with us, which is great. So we can build these partnerships and collaborations. Our funding instruments or our funding from the BMBF is rooted in the mentioned framework and based on it. We are oriented towards the interest from the research communities, but also the specific needs of the region. So within this framework, we basically fund all kinds of cooperation, which starts with funding researchers in their mobility to get to know each other in the regions, then fund like traveling conferences if you have perhaps found a partner in the region and you want to build partnership, then you can establish these traveling, this mobility. And the next step would be strategic partnerships. and so on. Which means an everyday researchers day. That means we found you basically in every stage of your cooperation with partners from certain regions. So from like the first stage where you travel to the region and look for partners in the region to have like research cooperations to find projects you can research on together. This would be the first stage. Then we can also fund the mobility so that you can travel back and forth to build the project, so to say. Yeah, and then we have calls you can apply for. These traveling conferences you can think of as a roadshow to find new partners and but also present your own potential. This is what we literally do with our activities in Central Asia. We go, for example, to Kazakhstan or to Uzbekistan. We are present on fairs and we present the systems and the researchers can get to know each other better. So we take also German researchers there and they can present their potential and look for future cooperations. This is, for example, when we found something like this, this has a duration of 1 year and is funded up to 40,000 euro for the traveling projects. The second stage would be the researcher mobility. So this is one step ahead. There we fund it up to 2 years with also 40,000 euros. We have recent projects with Uzbekistan, Armenia, and Ukraine. Then the third stage, if you have an established partnership, the third stage would be the cooperation projects. These are then the projects, the real projects, and we fund them up to 36 months with up to 300,000 euros. And the fourth stage would be institutional cooperations. The institutional funding often means sustainable development of the infrastructure. So it can be that the infrastructure is not the same in the target region. For example, you have a cooperation with a certain researcher from a region, but the infrastructure for him is not the same. So the institutional funding would mean that we try to come to the same level where you can research it. So the institutional funding helps to build these not only the infrastructure, but sustainable partnerships with, and we fund this with huge numbers. That these are single-digit millions of euro we fund, and also up to 60 months. So it's a long time. So the funding instruments are always announced at our website. I will show you later the where you can have a look from time to time. So if you're interested to apply for a funding call, you can visit our website from time to time and see if there are new calls. It's in the present it's only in German. So, but we work on an also English website where you can have a look the international framework. Also, the BMBF is aiming to announce a so-called framework call by the end of the year. This will be continuously open for 10 years. So keep it in mind, even if you are now on the beginning of your research career or have other things in mind, then cooperation with Central Asia, it's open for 10 years and gives a very good framework for the cooperation with this region. So if you plan to have a cooperation with a researcher from this region in the future, perhaps, you never know, keep it in mind and always come back to our website and check if there's a call you can apply for. What is a framework call? The framework call is an instrument, so you cannot apply to, but under the roof of the framework call, there are some smaller calls, and so it's basically a framework which makes it easier to apply for funding announcements. And there will be a lot of announcements under the roof of this framework call. Yeah, and we are already preparing the first funding announcements. So it's we have a lot to come. The first announcements will be, for example, the funding of institutional partnerships and research cooperation between German researchers, research institutions, and research institutions in the addressed regions. But also an announcement is to come, which will found the preparation of mutual applications from partners in Germany and the Eastern Partnership region. And what's also very important, we prepare an announcement which is aimed at supporting equality and strengthening the female researchers. So it's, yeah, also very important. These are just some examples what we prepare. And if this all already sounds a lot, we have even more. I also already mentioned it, in addition to this calls we are doing, and you can always look for at our website. We are very busy. We're being present in the region. We're traveling to the region and work on building these sustainable partnerships. Yeah, also with being present in the region, we are paving the roads for scientists from Germany and our countries for an even better collaboration and research environment. And we give, last but not least, the political support for these projects. This year we also signed quite a number of so-called letters of intent. This is again the political side, but it's for an improved research collaboration. Examples are letters of intent with Moldova, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, and furthers are being prepared. So, and in 2 weeks, we will also take part in on international fairs in autumn in Kazakhstan, and then followed by a week-long fair in Uzbekistan, the Inner Week, where some participants of the panel also take place in October. So if you are interested in more information, you can always visit our website, or also the website Cooperation International, which is also in English and also holds information about the funding calls and funding announcements. Or if you need more information from us, from the ministry, you can also contact us by this email address if you have questions. And yeah, this is my last slide, but it may be just the beginning for you if you want to build partnerships in these regions, because as our minister said, the future belongs to those who do something. And I think it's a very good, it's a very good quote. And if you are one of those, our minister had in mind with this quote, we are here to support you and your work. So thank you.
Okay, I will take over now from this moment on. We will enter the second phase or the second half of this session. My name is Kirsten Kienzler. I will be moderating the second part now. I'm from the Project Management Agency. We are an organization supporting the Federal Ministry of Research and Education. And we are very delighted to be able to present 4 examples of research funding projects which are funded through the Ministry of Research and Education. And you have seen in one of the slides that the various kinds of projects that BMBF is funding. And we're very happy to show you a little bit of the broad spectrum that the funding schemes comprise. So first of all, I would like to ask Mrs. Hopp to come to up here and to present us everything on the Trans Livestock Project. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, Ms. Hermani. I'm very honored to present to you here at the Tropentag 2023 the Livestock Project about the economic integration of livestock in the cross-border region of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. I'm writing my dissertation under the supervision of Professor Martin Petrik. He's professor for agricultural policy and member of the ZOI, the Center for Development and Environmental Research in Gießen. So titled Challenges and Opportunities for Value Chains in the Transborder Livestock Region between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, the project fits well into the Tropentag motto this year, which is competing pathways for equitable food systems transformation, trade-offs and synergies. We also have a lot of trade-offs and synergies in this project, which I'm going to talk about now. The pathway that is of interest here is the path that livestock takes in this region from the farm to the point of sale. The value chains of live animals and livestock produce like milk and eggs. In recent years, the governments, especially in Uzbekistan, have implemented policy reforms and liberalized trade, or at least tried to liberalize trade and encourage the restructuring of the agricultural sector. So this project aims to identify whether these liberalization attempts have benefited the sector and how. So having only a few minutes to present the project, I will focus mostly on the motivation and research questions, but I will be happy to get into more detail with you after the presentation, if you like. So the first question, the most important, if we look at the value chain, who is actually participating? So who are the main actors at different stages and what are their roles? Even more important is how do they work together? Is the collaboration successful or not? Both in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, smallholder farmers own more than 90% of the livestock. So this is the start of the value chain that we are looking at. And there are very likely good opportunities to improve smallholders' livelihoods by including them in the functioning value chains and support them, for example, with certification procedures. So we are beside the analysis of integration of the value chains, we of course are very happy to connect the research institutions that were just the topic here of Ms. Romanovsky. We are glad to be helped by the partners in the regions, which are indeed very good scientists, very good researchers, and have a better oversight over the various producers locally, and are in contact with smallholder farmers, providing them with different kinds of services, for example, breeding. My second question regarding the value chains, if we have determined who the participants are, of course, how is the price formed? So none of the players along the value chains are selling their product for free or giving away their product for free. And with every step of the value chain, a markup is added on top, especially with high risk or informal payment claims, which are often involved in this region. So one of our goals for this project is thus to shed light on the price formation, given this risk premia, markups, and the cost structure of various livestock and livestock products. With increasing demand stemming from growth, from the growing middle class and the increasing demand for processed food, market expansion in this region is definitely necessary. But unfortunately, smallholder producers, especially in Tajikistan, do not have the necessary means to tap into this market potential, let alone tap into export markets. So among others, high interest rates are a problem, and unmanageable land ownership structures make it very difficult to move from self-sufficiency to becoming a business. Also, current reforms tend to benefit large producers with high capacity and sufficient collateral. It makes sense that export markets include smallholders if we can tap into their potential. However, at the moment, this is not the case. So we want to see which are the possible ways to increase efficiency and competitiveness given the ownership structure, and does it make sense to include smallholders in this value chain, as they are very scattered in rural regions, and is this an exclusion criteria or not? What are the limiting factors for growth? The third question is regarding the export market. So which border trade barriers still persist between the two neighboring countries? Beside the practical factors that I've mentioned before, on the last slide, there are a lot of political barriers, as it's always often the case when it's regarding food security. Our findings so far are that livestock does not cross the borders, at least not officially. There's an export ban on both sides of the border. So Uzbekistan and Tajikistan have both forbidden that livestock crosses this border. And this could be for many reasons. First and foremost, both governments want to expand their own production and help to build their own value-added activities and be less dependent on imports. At the same time, producers should not be subjected to too high price fluctuations, but due to those price differences that are still there between Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, this incentivizes illicit trade. The lack of cooperation becomes extremely clear when you look at the border crossing posts. So the borders are very strictly guarded. The transport are still checked individually. This costs a lot of time and a lot of money, of course, as well. In order to realize the gains from trade between the both countries, it might make sense to cooperate instead of competing. Since my time is limited, I'm going to skip the details regarding the value chains and market integration, but what we are doing at the moment is collecting data on livestock products, live animals themselves. So how do the cost structures look like? What are the prices for different livestock products and inputs as well? I'm also collecting data on energy and wheat prices and international exchange rates, just to have a big picture of the situation at hand. We can see that exports are virtually non-existent. In the last few years, the poultry sector has improved a little bit. However, the volumes are really negligible, and it's just really taking off. We can see that Tajikistan has in recent years started to substitute imports very successfully in the poultry sector, which is taking off as well. However, trade between the both countries is still very low, even though there is a lot of potential to tap in. We have already found that there are two types of farms that have different types of needs. So if you want to include small-scale farmers, there are different solutions than there are for large-scale farmers. So it depends on which way the countries want to take looking forward. But coming back to the project, what has been done and what is planned so far, we have started this project in September 2022 with the kickoff workshop in Khujand with our first partners in Tajikistan. Then this year in March, we had a seminar on methods and technologies in livestock production, small farms in Tashkent, which was requested by the partners. Parallelly, I conducted interviews and focus group discussions while I was there and doing my fieldwork. And of course, parallelly, the data collection is going on all the time, and data analysis. What is planned for the next few years? In the spring next year, a seminar on applied economic methods is planned with eligible students from all 5 Central Asian countries to improve the research cooperation between Central Asia. And then finally, hopefully we will have a concluding workshop in Gießen then with all the partners together where we can present our findings and hopefully even give policy suggestions. Here you can see who we are working with together in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Also, we're working together with a food and agriculture organization in Kazakhstan, Almaty, which is monitoring our progress. And yeah, we're very thankful for these, for the help of these scientists, which are indeed very qualified and motivated. And we hope that this project is going to be a huge success for all parties involved. So I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to explore animal husbandry in the region, and very thankful for the funding from the ministry. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hopp. And I also thank you very much for trying to keep the time at best so that we will also be able to enjoy the other presentations, but I'm sure there will be questions later on and we will have time for that, or we try to make time for that for sure. Thank you very much. So going from livestock now to a different field, I would like to introduce Mr. Bergthor today, who will talk about hydrogen. Namely the Green HyRECA project funded by BMBF. Welcome.
All right, so thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Paul Bergthor. I'm a researcher at the Rainer Le Mans Institute, and I will present our project today, which has the acronym Green HyRECA, that's right, and this stands for Green Hydrogen Generation Potential Based on Renewable Energies in Central Asia. Before I go ahead, I would like to thank BMBF and DLR for the opportunity to present here at this very nice venue. So, few words about the institute that I'm working in. The Rainer Le Mans Institute is a private, not-for-profit research institute that is based here in Berlin, in Adlershof. Some of the students may know it because some of the HU faculties are located there, mainly physics, mathematics, and other ones. So the focus of our institute is to contribute to the energy transition towards 100% renewable energy. We have 3 groups, one focusing on Germany and like the industrialized world, another group focusing on the transport sector, and the research group I'm working in is focusing on developing countries and emerging countries and to support renewable energies in these regions. So let's quickly talk about hydrogen. You all know that this is really like a hot topic. A lot of funding is going into this field and it's discussed everywhere. So hydrogen is considered a key technology for low carbon energy supply and especially for our energy transition here in Germany, because excess electricity can be used to generate hydrogen and then reconvert it into electricity through fuel cells. So we can use a lot of renewable power generate hydrogen. So for countries like Germany, green hydrogen is important to enable the energy transition, but it really needs to be green, meaning that the power has to come from renewable power sources. And several studies have indicated that Germany will not be able to generate all the hydrogen on its own, so we need partner countries and partner regions. One interesting partner region is Central Asia because of the sheer availability of renewable resources and land and other factors. So it is interesting for Central Asia to probably develop an export commodity, but at the same time to use hydrogen for its own decarbonization. But there's a lot of questions, of course, and these are the ones that we want to address here with our project. So how many hydrogen and especially green hydrogen can be produced? How much can be exported? How much needs to be consumed locally? Is it sustainable to produce hydrogen in the region? as you may know, we need water, and we need water in a specific purity to produce hydrogen. And this is a challenge in a region like Central Asia, which is dry, and where we already have conflicts for the use of water in other sectors like agriculture, for example. And then, of course, the question is how to transport the hydrogen to other regions, and of course, how can we facilitate more cooperation within the region? That's a big topic. So briefly, the Green HyRECA project is one of the shorter projects that Ms. Romanowski presented earlier. It has a duration of 2 years, and the main focus is really to establish a network and facilitate exchange between researchers from different institutions. And we have partners in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. We mainly use open source based modeling for developing long-term energy transition pathways. And the main activities are to conduct such simulations. We need a lot of data for that. And then we will conduct capacity trainings and seminars with our partners. And we will have field trips to the region and participate in conferences. But we will as well host guest researchers in our institute here in Berlin. So in the short time, I just want to go like really on the surface of the details. At the moment, we are focusing on 2 activities. One is to conduct a energy transition study for Uzbekistan. So we test and we develop our method always for one country, and then we will apply it for the entire region. And at the same time, we are working on a geospatial study that is looking into the water availability for producing green hydrogen. This is more like a spatial study. So very briefly here for Uzbekistan, the challenge at the moment is that similar to other Central Asian countries, the current electricity system is based on fossil fuels, mainly gas and coal, because Uzbekistan has some domestic gas resources. But the demand is projected to increase very strongly based on population growth, but especially because of the uptake of appliances in the residential sector and the increase of consumption in the residential sector. So even if you don't consider the pressuring topics like climate change and other ones, even if you just look into the energy consumption, it's clear Uzbekistan has to change its energy supply system, because otherwise we will have power outages in the future, and we will have these power outages mainly in the winter months where we need a lot of electricity. So we conducted few simulations. One is taking into account the policy targets from the Uzbek government. They just announced that they want to install 7 gigawatt of PV and 5 gigawatt of wind. And then we conducted another simulation where we have an RE share of at least 90%. And we have conducted a cost optimized simulation. And before I end, just briefly, the key parameters here are the RE share. So this tells you how much renewables are used. And of course, if it's a high share, there will be less emissions. And then the LCOE, which is the levelized cost of electricity. This is one of the key KPIs in the energy area, because this is the cost for 1 kilowatt hour. So what we basically see here is that what the Uzbek government plans is not the best option actually, because it is not the cheapest one, but at the same time, it's not the one with the highest RE share. So we can show that even with a much higher RE share, we have more or less the same cost per kilowatt hour, or in a cost optimized system, it would be possible to increase power generation costs, which is important for emerging economies, but at the same time, we would have a higher RE share. So this is just a brief results. We will go into more details. And with that, I'm coming to an end. I just want to announce we will have now the opportunity, thanks to BMBF, to travel to the region, to the InnoWeek. And of course, we will showcase our results to policymakers. And in Uzbekistan, our main partner is the National Institute for Renewable Energy Sources. So we equip our partners with such methodologies to really conduct policy planning in their countries. All right, thank you very much, and feel free to get in contact with us for questions or even internships at our institute. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you also for this very, let's say, actual topic. And I would like to take you now away from the Central Asian region more to the South Caucasus region, where our last projects, the last two, do their field work and research activities. And it is my pleasure to start with the Kabul project, Barcode of Life, Biodiversity Project, another topic. Mr. Hein, thank you.
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you here today about the Kabul project. My name is Niels Hein. I'm the coordinator of the Caucasus Barcode of Life project. And I'm from the LIB Museum König in Bonn. We are part of the Leibniz Association. We are a research museum with a clear social mission. So our mission is that we strengthen the development of a democratic knowledge society. And the Museum König has just recently been in the media because of the anniversary of the Parliamentary Council, the funding of the Federal Republic of Germany. Just to introduce the institute a little bit better. So what is Kabul? We are a collaborative project with 3 research institutions from Germany, the LIB, University of Koblenz and Landau, and the University of Göttingen, together with 2 Georgian partners, the Ilia State University in Tbilisi, Georgia, and the Agricultural University in Tbilisi, Georgia. And in Armenia, our partners are the Scientific Center of Zoology and Hydroecology and the Yerevan State University. We are a collaborative project under the umbrella of the International Barcode of Life. So all International Barcode of Life projects, and you can see here some examples, are currently applying the same standards. Standards for what? Our common goal is the development of a comprehensive inventory of the organisms of the Caucasus. And we do that based on the genetic information. And to give you an idea of what this is, I'm using the image of a library because that's basically what we're doing. We are building a huge library where all the information can be publicly accessible. So you have to imagine every book you see here can be one specimen. One specimen of a species contains a certain genetic information and it's read in letters just like in a book. And what we're doing is we're extracting this information and sorting it into shelves, basically. And what you can see here, there's obviously books that belong to the same species, so it looks the same and it contains the same genetic information, even though it might be slightly different. However, this genetic information clearly identifies it as a certain species. And while we are entering books in one room of this library into one shelf, you probably know that on the other side of this library, the rooms are burning. So we are under what we're seeing now is a huge biodiversity loss globally. So the importance of this project is to make a basis to protect these biodiversity hotspots, and the Caucasus is one of the biodiversity hotspots. You can see it here on the map by Myers, who identified the most important biodiversity hotspots for conservation priorities. And the Caucasus is somehow special because it contains subtropical elements and temperate elements. So what are we actually doing, or what was funded by the BMBF? Is that we created or established laboratory infrastructure and collection infrastructure at our partner universities and research facilities in the Caucasus region. We created a publicly accessible barcode reference library. We also trained the next generation of taxonomists, because these methods, modern genetic methods, needs to be, you need a certain education for that. Traditional taxonomic identification of species basically works like you're sitting in a laboratory looking at the specimen and describing it and assigning it to a certain species. The genetic information extracted from the individual can then be used to improve or correct your specific identification. And we are supporting regional nature protection and conservation initiatives. So how are we doing this? The CABOL workflow is applied from the German Barcode of Life workflow. So the German Barcode of Life is also BMBF funded project, started in 2011. And over the last 12 years, certain protocols and certain ways of how to create such a library were established. And when the project started in 2020, the CABOL project, we could basically apply the well-established workflows and protocols based on the GBOL project. So applying this workflow means that we have to have, of course, manpower in the Caucasus region, and we could employ more than 25 people in the laboratories, in the collections, and for field work, and we were using mainly students. Mainly students because of the COVID situation, we weren't allowed to travel in between the different partner countries. So we had to find ways how to collect specimen in the Caucasus, in Georgia and Armenia, and we relied on student helpers, which worked out extremely well. We educated or trained these students and the laboratory staff during workshops, online workshops first. In the beginning of 2022, we were able to travel again, so we could do this analog or on-site. We developed joint lectures to further improve the knowledge of biodiversity, taxonomy, and biology. We did joint excursions and expeditions, and we supervised thesis, bachelor, master, and PhD thesis. This is the workflow that we applied. I don't want to go too much into detail because it's a 9-step workflow. Basically, it contains steps in the field. It contains steps that are applied in the museums and in the collections, and it contains steps that are actually happening in the laboratories. And then there is, of course, the data validation. Our results so far, the project is now running until 2024. We have currently over 20,000 entries, and we could add more than 20 publications, adding more than 500 species. That is the actual current number. It will become more. 500 new species to the Caucasus and an incredibly large part to science. And this publicly accessible library or online data portal will be the future basis for all upcoming monitoring projects. To protect this biodiversity hotspot, it is incredibly important that we know the status quo. Otherwise, we cannot detect the change. So this work we are doing is incredibly important, and these are some of the publications. And just as an example, a publication from 2021 where we could add with one publication 150 species to this area. So species that until that time, no one knew they would be in the Caucasus region. I'm incredibly happy that also our student helpers were able to contribute to that with scientific publications. Shota Yaparashvili published his bachelor thesis. He conducted a checklist of the Sylphide from Georgia. Amine Kosyan is doing a PhD on the arachnofauna of Armenia. So she added a new genus to the Armenian checklist of spiders. We have Eka could publish her master thesis based on the data that was produced within the Cobalt project. And the same here, the last news publication, where we can see that there's a large group of people, all students mainly working within the project, getting the opportunity to publish their information. And of course, this is only helpful if we can bring this into society. So we also had to apply citizen science or other measures. And we conducted the first public BioBlitz in Tbilisi and in Yerevan last year. And there will be upcoming BioBlitz events in the next year. Do I have to finish? Thank you.
Thank you for this very elegant end. Thank you. And I would like to ask our last presenter of today to come up, Mr. Rinke, who will present another aspect from the Caucasus region, from Armenia. And we are now going on a boat drive to Lake Yerevan. Thank you.
Thanks, Frau Kienzler, for introducing me and my talk, which is telling you something in the next 7 minutes about our project on Lake Sevan. We work with a team that consists not only from my group in Magdeburg, from the Helmholtz Center of Environmental Research, but we also cooperate with many colleagues at PLACE, which are two institutes of the National Academy of Sciences and also an authority that belongs to the Ministry of the Environment. Lake Sevan is located here, right in the central region of Armenia. It's a very big lake, more than 1,000 square kilometers. So it's 2.5 the size of Lake Constance, which is the largest lake we have. Really big, also quite deep. And it's the biggest freshwater resource that you can find in the Caucasus region. So it's not only a place of interest for ecologists, it is really important for the self-sustainability of the country and the region. The lake suffered a lot in the past. Look at the blue line, that's the water level given as meters above sea level. It was originally at roughly 1,900, so close to 2,000 meters above sea level. And that suffered from a severe drop by almost 20 meters in the middle of the last century because they used the water for hydropower generation. And that was a real catastrophe for the lake, who shrunk in size. And we lost a couple of species of endemic fish, but also water quality deteriorated. The government now tries to refill the lake, but there is stagnation because the water crisis and the impact of drought are increasing. But we not only talk about water quantity, we also talk about water quality, because the lake is suffering a lot from pollution and deterioration of the environment. These are two symptoms, typical symptoms that lake researchers look at. This is the loss of oxygen in the deeper parts of the lake. These are profiles that we recorded during our expeditions. Look at this blue line, where you see that oxygen goes down to almost 0% in both basins. There's a big and small Sevan as sub-basins of the lake. So the lake is losing oxygen, which means this habitat is not any longer livable for fish. And due to increasing nutrient pollution, we also have problems with cyanobacterial blooms, with massive cyanobacterial bloom, which cause a lot of public attention and concern. And that is why we argue that the management of such big compartmental systems in your environment really require a knowledge basis. And the philosophy of our work, not only in Armenia, is you need a good empirical basis in terms of environmental data. So we invest a lot in field monitoring. We also use remote sensing because it's not so easy to collect data from such a big lake far away. Also, the Armenian colleagues have restricted abilities in terms of equipment and money. That's why remote sensing is attractive. And together with theory and just transdisciplinary knowledge, you develop a system understanding. How does that lake works? What are the drivers and the pressures? And that all that helps you also to construct ecosystem models or environmental models, because we need forecasts in the past. We always followed the policy in environmental research. We collect data, and based on the data of the past, we design how we should manage the system. For example, you record flood statistics, and then you define your diking system and flood protection system according to the historical data. That doesn't work anymore because the environment is changing due to climate change. So we have to we have to establish a management that is future-proof, and therefore we also need models. And all that together, the forecasting system, but also the empirical data and the system understanding, contributes to a concept that we call really knowledge-based, so that you can make sure it is tailored to the problem, to the system at place, and also to the future. Give you a few examples. This is the cyanobacterial bloom that we observed in 2018. The satellite pictures show the massive impact on the lake, and we designed a monitoring program where we really went out and collected data about nutrients, dissolved gases, their dynamics over the time. And you need these data. They were previously never available for the lake because it was impossible for the colleagues to go out every month in that way. And these data help us to understand what are the drivers, and we also characterized the cyanobacterial species that made up the bloom in order to understand their growth dynamics. At the same time, we establish models for lake constants. This is an animation, I'm starting it already now, that shows you temperature and oxygen in the lake. And this is a longitudinal cross-section of the lake, so to say from the west to the east. And the color shows you the temperature, and here the oxygen. And you see that, for example, during summer, we have a stratified system. The surface gets warm, the bottom stays cold at 5 degrees. And you see how that changes over the season. Of course, there are inflow dynamics and atmospheric drivers that play a role. And you also see here in this oxygen that we have specific regions that suffer from low oxygen. That's quite different for the two subbasins, which was interesting for us to see it also in the model because we observed it also in the field. And these are not only scientific toys for the researchers. This is something that is extremely convincing when you show it to people at the ministry, because they realize that there is something like a weather forecast thinkable also for the environment. And it's also very helpful to give support for ideas that you develop for the future, because you can play with this model and show what this or that management decision may impact. We also provide climate forecasts for Armenia and specifically for this lake. for different scenarios. I don't go into detail, but only want to highlight this red line or lines, because we always work with ensembles. So there are many realizations that we analyze. The red line is the most pessimistic scenario for Lake Sevan, and this is the bottom temperature, which shows a very alarming signal, because in the second half of this century, this lake will undergo severe deep water warming, only by 3 centigrades. Sounds a little bit, but 3 centigrades are a lot for microorganisms in the lake, and that will change the lake dramatically. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that we notice exactly the same trends in our lakes in Germany. So we suffer the same fate. And I want to finish with my own experience. If you want to work in other countries successfully, I think it really starts with the local specialists and experts. But then you need really a solid outcome of your work. You have to show solid scientific products, because you need that to build trust, to communicate your research in an honest way, also things that do not work well and which things are reliable. And then you can convince stakeholders and authorities, maybe first in a more formal way, that was a visit in the Ministry of Environment. But when you know the people closer, then you really also come, this is the same person here, then you are also able to communicate in a more direct and open way. And this is the moment where you can really influence decisions, which is very nice to experience as a researcher. Thanks. Good.
I would like to thank all of the 4 speakers, and you've seen now the wide range of topics, of research topics, and there would be many more if I asked everyone in the room here today, what is your favorite scientific topic? So the questions that we tried now is, under what umbrella could we now start a discussion going beyond the topics as such? So we have come up with some questions that are important or of interest to the political side. And for this, I would like to ask the 4 presenters to come up to the panel so that we can have just a short panel discussion. We will look at the time. And I hope we will find some answers, or at least find some interesting discussions. So just please take a seat. I will stay here.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have light, we have water, we have microphones. I think we're all set. So I will start with my personal favorite question, because I also used to be a researcher. I was fully enthusiastic, and then I entered politics. And the first question that I was asked is, what impact do you have with your research, and how do you measure the impact? So once you are talking about capacity building and people stay in the region or leave the region, or you have we've seen some wonderful results and political talks, we've seen some publications and so on. So what would you say, looking at your research, maybe also your experiences, what would you say is the impact that you make with your research? Who would like to start? Ladies first.
Well, okay, then I'll start. Well, as the project has started a few months ago, I believe that there has been no measurable impact yet. However, I think this impact is often something intangible, as connecting people is usually something that you can't ascribe value to. Just providing information and being there and showing that there are other ways to do things is maybe an intangible form of impact that is still very impactful, right? So just connecting researchers and institutions might not have a price tag, but in the long term will be profitable anyways for all of the parties. What do you think?
Maybe let me add to that. The impact is, of course, it's difficult to measure what will be the outcome in a decade or in a century. However, what we can see within the project is that we have a very direct impact shown, and that is relatively easy in this project when it comes to an inventory, simply by the amount of specimen or species that we are detecting and the number of publications that are produced or published in this way. However, I think the impact will last much longer, especially what we're trying to do within the project is we're trying to mainstream the topic of biodiversity and bring it into society. So this mainstreaming of biodiversity, going to the kindergartens, going to the schools, going to the ministries, NGOs, discussing the importance of biodiversity so that everyone, and with everyone I mean me and us included, think of biodiversity first when they think of a certain research topic. And this, of course, will hopefully have an impact. And of course, it is incredibly difficult. Do you have an idea how to measure it? For me, it is really difficult.
Ask you first.
It is extremely difficult. However, I see in the conversations that we're having, and the project is now running for 3 or 4 years, that there is in all the discussions, there is a certain change in the perspective on biodiversity. And I recently took part in a delegation trip to Georgia, and biodiversity was a very hot topic then. And I was really happy to see that. So I think that using the terms and going to, like you said, or you showed on your slide, going to the ministry, going to NGOs, going to other public schools or kindergartens, that can increase and have an impact on the society in the end. And this will strengthen it's a democratic way how to change and how to improve society in a certain way.
Yeah, maybe I would like to add as well that there's kind of an indirect impact. So for example, in my field, in the energy field, this is very much about the exchange on what kind of methodologies we use. So in the energy field, open source and open science is now a much bigger topic, and all these models that are open are more accepted. And I think this is like a long-term impact, not only through this project, but through many others from our institute, but many other German stakeholders, scientific stakeholders. And then I think an important impact is if we collaborate with the guest researchers or researchers in our institutes for some time, and they learn how our work life is going, and like how we discuss topics, that everyone has the right to openly speak out, like inform about his critics. I think this is not so common in Central Asia at the moment. In the institutions, it's more very like, there's a clear rule who is allowed to like criticize. And I think, and I hope that this will be like a slow but long-term change in the work style.
To my opinion, gaining political impact is something that is extremely difficult, particularly when we talk about this kind of project frameworks that have a timescale of 2 years. Normally, it's very difficult. Secondly, we design the project mostly along scientific interests and not for maximizing political impact. So that's not our primary target. And third, many people argue simply because I provide new knowledge, this is automatically influencing the political level. Let's say if I know or tell why the lake is going into a bad state, automatically there is a political movement to work against it. but to my experience, this is not true. Good research alone does not necessarily imply that there is political impact. And if you ask for measuring the impact, it's also very difficult. But let me answer in a different way. I would say there are some indicators that are quite reliable, and that is when the involvement of decision makers, of ministries, authorities, and so on, goes beyond the pure representative activities. Let's say if they come to your final workshop, that's nothing, because they just come, sit there, say 2 nice sentences, and then they go. So it has to go beyond, and that can be that you are asked for your opinion, or writing a concept, or contributing to a decision. So these are often things that are difficult to measure. That's why I'm hesitant to call it measures. How should I measure when I give an advice? Often these are things that are actually not at the official events of the final workshops. This takes place in the back room somewhere in the ministry, but these are very good indicators, I would say.
Yeah, maybe an opportunity to sum this up. It all starts with a personal conversation.
Yeah.
That is my opinion, or what I see is it all starts with a personal communication between two people. And when you gain trust, and that was also on some of the slides, I think that is a very important start for everything. And then when people are listening to you, you have the chance to present your findings, your results, and your ideas, how to deal with them or how to publish them. But the origin is a personal conversation.
Okay, you can keep the microphone. I have mine here. And no, there is no one solution. I'm not here. If I had one solution, I would not be here. I would be working, I don't know where. There are organizations who are doing scientific research on impact measurements and impact analysis. That's why I wanted to ask and hear your opinion, because I think there are so many factors going with it. It's like you mentioned, the timelines. When do you measure? Shortly or something. You mentioned indirect impacts, and you have like some social things, changing social things. You mentioned different scales. Do I look at just the impact for the field or for the lake, or do I look at the ecosystem? Do I look at, and you mentioned the different stakeholders. Do I look at the society or at the politicians? So all of that you mentioned is actually something that is why it is not always easy, but yet somehow, of course, we would like to know. Yes. So I do not have any concluding remarks or results on that. I just wanted to hear your opinion, because it's always something that we have to think about when we fund. Yeah, what impact does the funding scheme has? And the second question that is also a big concern to us, and also personally, is how do you motivate and keep young scientists in research? Research is specifically in the South Caucasus and Central Asian region, it's not the big money sector. People go rather to businesses and do other things, or even go abroad. So it's not very easy to attract scientists to the specific fields. I'm not so sure about Germany. I was very engaged, but what would you see? How can we motivate young people, be it here or in other countries?
I would say it's money.
It's
It's
money.
all about money. Unfortunately, it's basically all about money, because when you have a student who cannot, who has to work for a living, that takes all his time, it is incredibly difficult to become more involved in a research topic. And then, of course, you go for something where the outcome in the end, you study something, law or economics, where in the end you might earn more money. So we have to give them perspectives, and that is basically money. Right from the beginning, because you can have very enthusiastic students. If they cannot make a living out of what they're doing, it would be really difficult.
Mrs. Hopp, why did you enter science?
Sorry?
Mrs. Hopp, why did you enter science as a young scientist?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to disagree partly. I don't want that we go out here and then it's like, okay, money. Of course, there's a level that everyone needs, that's for sure. But I think there are other reasons for motivation. I mean, first of all, it's to have a meaningful work. I think that's very important. If you do something stupid, this is very demotivating. So we need a meaningful task. And of course, the work environment has to be fair when it comes to like the salary, but as well to like to speak out and somehow influence the work of your institute or your research project. Yeah, we have to provide, I think, flexible working conditions. That changed a lot through COVID. And of course, it's important that researchers have the opportunity to evolve and learn new stuff, because I assume that every researcher has like an intrinsic motivation for like evolve him or herself. And if this option is there, then I think people tend to stay in institutions.
Well, I cannot speak for the Central Asian countries or other countries where and how to motivate young researchers there, but in my opinion, what I have experienced is that oftentimes doctoral students are left alone with their work and do not have a supportive community and supportive team or supervisor that really cares about the research. So if of course money is important, but if it's just the money, a researcher will probably not stay in the field very long. But if you can see the successes, which are more likely if you have a supportive and inclusive mentoring team, if you cooperate instead of well, maybe competing with other doctoral students because of publishing pressure or something like that. This makes this career more, I don't want to say comfortable, but yeah, maybe even it makes it more fun. And well, this is one of the reasons why I decided to be, because it's interesting, because it really changes, or it might have an impact on the world, and it might change something that is more important to me than money on the one hand, I guess.
Maybe to clarify, I'm not talking that there is enthusiastic students. There's a lot of enthusiastic students, but as you said in the introduction, it is difficult. The money is earned not in ecology or biology, it's earned somewhere else. So what you have to give them is an opportunity how to earn money based on their knowledge. And that is, of course, incredibly motivating when you can see that you are an enthusiastic student, and then in the end you can even earn money or make a living out of it, and you can create a career in science, which is extremely difficult, of course, also in Germany. But this lack of opportunities and I have to say it again, it is probably the money opportunities that are missing. That is.
I don't want to repeat and basically fundamentally agree with what Niels said. It's about the career options. I want to give you an example. In Armenia, the persons we work with are super motivated, but they have, besides the job at the institute, also 2 other jobs. So they work 60 hours a week, but only 25 hours for the project or for the science. And at the other hours, they have to earn money. That's why we started to give parts of the funds for subsidizing their salaries to increase the time they spend in the project, which was super helpful. And we don't talk about high amounts of money, let's say 150 euros a month per person. So that doesn't really make big change in the project budget. But I would like, if you ask me what I would wish, I would say it would be very good if based on such projects like we are doing it here, with a 2-year frame, that arising from that, there's at least an option offered from the BMBF or from the International Bureau or whatsoever, to have something like an option that talented people that are very motivated get a personal funding for 2 or 3 years, let's say, to develop them to a level that they can keep their own science funded. Because the problem is that we have enough funding instruments, but they are not easily accessible for these, let's say, Armenian scientists, because they don't know exactly the system. They have to speak English in a better way. They have to learn the literature better. So they need actually 2 or 3 years of additional funding with a short fellowship or research stay or whatsoever, but it should be focused on the person that is very talented. And after that, they are able to write proposals to EU, to national funding bodies, and so on. Then it works. But currently, there is a gap between the research projects that you conduct and the ability of the foreign researchers to assess the funds that you provide for further support. In the water sector, there were 10 years ago, there was a program called IPSWAT, which was very free and open for foreign young talented people to come to Germany to do a PhD. That was very nice. Something like that.
Thank you. And looking at the time, I take your wish as a very nice ending note for this part of the discussion, because I want, looking at the time, to ask if there is any question from the audience to the panelists at this stage. Yes. Okay. We have a microphone coming so that we can hear you.
Thank you for all the interesting presentations. I'm Kartika. I'm originally from Indonesia, working here in Germany. So since yesterday, I've been speaking with a lot of researchers, and a lot of times the challenge is with how to bring the research results to policymakers. And I think you mentioned creating trust with policymakers. Is it possible to include this in the design of the project funding by BMBF to have a component on policy, creating enabling environment for policy, bringing these research results to policymakers? Thank you.
That's a very easy answer for me. I say yes, it is possible, because it's up to you to design the research projects. And if you have a component that deals with that, usually we do not limit ideas in this respect.
So you briefly touched this point before. Freedom of speech in the partner countries and free flow of science dialogue, and particularly also, what's about do your partners partners hesitate to publish some negative news on environmental deterioration, maybe? What is your perception on this point?
So 1 or 2 answers, just because
In Armenia, I would say there's no problem in communicating also negative issues. I previously worked a lot in China. There is a big issue. It's very country dependent. In Armenia, not.
My experience is that some scientists hesitate with publishing not negative results, but results, because as soon as it is published, the information that one species is here and there, of course, becomes the question, how can it be used for this certain plant or a certain animal? And then some of these scientists really hesitate to publish it. Again, then it is about trust and finding ways how to find solutions, how to make it publicly available, but still in a way that it cannot be misused for anything. So again, it's about trust.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I would have many more questions to the audience as well as to you, but unfortunately we are at the end of this session, and I would like to ask Mrs. Hermani just to give some last words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As always, very impressive. I would like to say that, yes, of course, we learned a lot from the presentations of these fascinating projects, which BMBF is funding in cooperation with its partners from Central Asia and Eastern Partnership countries. But it shows also how especially important sustainable funding is, and that only sustainable funding leads to meaningful research. And in this context, it is a very good perspective, in our opinion, that we are going to publish now a regular funding calls over a period of 10 years, which support this collaboration of German researchers with the South Caucasus and Central Asia. Well, I wish you all the possible success of your endeavors, and thank you for coming to Berlin and to present your research. I hope we will see you soon in other contexts. We travel to Almaty and Tashkent next month, where we also show there our partners, our research, our funded research. Thank you very much for your time and interest.